Before we start, just a quick reminder. The views and content shared on this podcast are for entertainment purposes only and are not a substitute for professional advice. Please check the full disclaimer in the show notes for more information.
Welcome to Self-Centered, the podcast that's all about you. We're your hosts.
I'm Allie, a therapist and life coach.
And I'm Katie, a fitness coach and personal trainer. We know what it's like to feel burnt out, taken for granted, and like your life revolves around everyone but yourself.
By learning to trust yourself, prioritize your needs, and set healthy boundaries, we help you break free from guilt, overfunctioning, and toxic patterns that keep you stuck in relationships and a life that doesn't truly serve you.
Join us each week as we dive into the tools, stories, and mindset shifts you need to create a life that centers you.
Because being self-centered isn't selfish, it's essential. This is the first of 4 episode series on the ego. The first 2 episodes are going to be talking all about ego so you can understand it in yourself and others, what it's like to experience when you're on the receiving end. So that's the first 2 episodes. And then the last 2 episodes are going to be like, okay, so what can you do? So in 2 weeks, you're going to hear the 3rd episode, which is all about how to not be gaslit, how to prevent that. And then the last episode, we are unveiling our self-centered framework, which just literally covers everything that you need to become centered. And it has a lot to do with ego. So stay tuned for that. I'm super excited. The series was inspired by Katie because she has just been asking me so many questions about the ego. Like, what is it? How can you tell when someone has a big ego or they're ego-centered?
Yeah. Or a wounded ego, or I just like, because we've heard the term in pop culture, and I can understand it from afar. And I'm like, oh yeah, when someone says something, I'm like, oh, I can identify that is ego. Mm-hmm. But if you were to ask me to define it, or you were to ask me to explain all of its counterparts and how it relates to life, I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know. And I've, been dealing with a lot of situations in life recently where I'm just so much more aware of, I think this has something to do with it, and I'm confused.
Yeah, for sure. And being on the receiving end of a wounded ego is confusing. And we'll get into why, but it just feels like, what is true? Like, what is reality? It's kind of this twilight zone where things aren't adding up, things aren't making sense, and you just keep maybe doubting yourself or checking what's going on. So understanding the ego will really help you actually trust yourself more, because you will be able to tell, oh, that's a wounded ego. You don't need to double check reality because you got it, right? They're the ones who have it twisted. And understanding this for me was huge in terms of my journey to becoming self-centered, because it was so confusing with some people in my family and then some friends that I had, where I guess I thought if I can just explain things, like, oh, they're just confused. They just don't understand. So let me clarify. Let me get on the same page, and using reason to try to get on the same page, and it just wasn't working. And understanding the ego, how it functions when it's wounded, when it's a weak ego. So it's hard to talk about this before I teach you all things. But dealing with that is exceptionally confusing, just because the person is so confident in their perspective and you're just left dumbfounded. Like, what is going on? Why can't we get on the same page? This isn't making sense. And especially if you're a really considerate, conscientious, self-reflective person, you want to consider the feedback that other people are giving you when they're saying, oh, it's actually you, right? They're denying things that happened, or they're saying that you're to blame or you did something wrong. You think to yourself, okay, well, let me actually consider that, because maybe I'm not perfect, right? Mm-hmm. And it can just get so twisted in your mind where you go down this rabbit hole and then you're trying to understand. So you might even ask them for more clarification. And then you start just like trying so hard to see yourself in a way that just isn't who you are. And then everything gets muddied. So we are going to clarify with this series. You are going to learn all about it. You'll be able to see any areas in yourself too that maybe you want to work on. And then you can use the centered framework in order to work on that and strengthen your own ego and see where people are lacking, and then also just prevent gaslighting. So let's go. This is core piece of becoming self-centered and staying self-centered.
I'm so excited for this.
Yay! I'm so excited too. Okay. I do want to start by saying that all of this is pretty much unconscious, meaning we're not conscious of it, right? So this is all happening beneath the surface of awareness. And so none of this is a deliberate, intentional thing.
You're not choosing it.
You're not choosing it. Yeah. This all comes from psychoanalytic, psychodynamic theory. So that's like Sigmund Freud. And of course, we have, made progress and there's modern versions of this. So I'm giving you the modern version of this. But insurance companies don't really like psychoanalysis or psychodynamic approaches. They really like manualized skill-based therapies because you can basically, like CBT and DBT, because you can basically just say, oh, well, I taught them these skills and so now therapy's done. And that way insurance doesn't have to pay for as much. Whereas, a psychodynamic, psychoanalytic approach is going beneath the surface and really exploring what's going on in your subconscious and your unconscious. And so, in my opinion, the depth is really important, and then use the skills when you explore and find something like, ooh, okay, this is what's going on subconsciously. Okay, well, here's a skill for that. Or you do one of those experiential body-based, brain-based methods for helping the person move through the feelings and the experience of that so that the brain can update.
Is that like your somatic style therapy?
Yep, that's like the somatic style therapy, yeah. And brain spotting, EMDR, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's all important, and it's just a bummer that we do not have as much support in the field for this. Yeah. And that might be why a lot of what I share with you today is different than what you think about when you think about ego.
This is like a total tangent. But I'm curious, is it like this in other countries? Do we know? Like, is this just an American problem that we are not... Like, because I don't know. I'm like, Americans are psychologically a little different as we've seen in recent years. So I'm just curious. That's something maybe I'll Google that later.
We can answer that question in one of our future episodes because we'll have the time to look into it. I'm curious about that. Yeah, because it's our system and our way of payment and insurance payment and all of that really drives it here. And in other places, there's different systems. So good question. Okay. So as you all know, last time I really enjoyed being a little side feminine, whatever, quote unquote. And for this series, I am back in the masculine. I'm going to be doing a lot of teaching.
I appreciate you so much.
And Katie, you can jump in though and ask questions because you are the audience perspective that, my brain can't think that way. What have you heard about the ego, or like what is your kind of just general understanding?
My understanding of ego is that, and this is from like the 2 psychology courses that I took in high school.
You don't have to be right.
No. But this is like, it's so far away is what I'm saying, that it as time goes on, it gets confusing. But I understood it as like a primitive man. Like you're very...
Okay.
I don't know, like a very base level version of ourselves that is protective. And it kind of like centers you as like the only thing, but not in a healthy way. I don't know if that's
okay. Yeah.
explaining that well. But yeah, primitive man was the best way that I could think about it. And when, again, like I can identify it when I see it in person, or like when I experience a situation, I'm like, I feel like that person is speaking from their ego. Like they're speaking from their very primitive, protective self that views themselves as, oh, I got to be the best thing. That's kind of what I understand it as, or I'm top dog, or
they need to look good. They need to be superior. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. And that's definitely how we talk about it in pop culture, is very much having a big ego just means you're a narcissist. Right? Yeah. Or if you're ego-centered, it means you're a narcissist. And this is just the usual way that we talk about it, but that's actually not the case. So we all have an ego and we can't get rid of our ego. That's another myth, because there are spiritual perspectives, like Eckhart Tolle, for example, who's great and I love him. His spiritual perspective is that you need to get rid of the ego. You need to transcend the ego, because his perspective is that the ego is an illusion of identity. And it's the identity that you come up with is based on these stories that you have or conditions of worth that you have, and you need to transcend it. You need to dissolve it in order to access your true nature at like who you really are. You know, there are some similarities there to what's actually true from a psychological standpoint. And I believe the ego is a mental construct. That's true, but it does have a purpose. And you can't just get rid of it. I think that you can observe it and recognize it for what it is without giving it power. So maybe you have a thought, they need to understand me, right? They're misunderstanding me. They need to understand me. That's a weak ego thought, the thought that a weak ego would have. What we can do is we can observe that and say, oh, that's just my ego. Right? That's not really me, and that's not really true. So you can recognize it for what it is without giving it power and say, you know, that thought isn't mine. It's my ego trying to keep me safe. But you have to develop a strong ego first in order to have the skills to even be able to observe it and reflect on it and recognize it for what it is. So the question isn't, do I have an ego? The question is my ego healthy and strong? So when we're talking about narcissism or narcissistic traits, that's a weak, underdeveloped, unhealthy ego. And we actually want a strong ego. Ego isn't bad. It's just, it needs to be healthy. So I'm going to go a little more into like, what even is it and how do we understand it? When we do have a strong ego, what it allows us to do is it gives us the capacity to actually see reality for what it is. So one of the reasons that it's so confusing to deal with people who have a wounded or weak ego, a wounded ego is definitely weak. When we're dealing with someone who has a wounded or weak ego, then they cannot fully recognize what's really true. And they also aren't able to reflect. They can't tolerate discomfort. They can't delay gratification. Like they just, want what they want right now, which it sounds like kind of the primitive idea you were having. Like it's like a baby's just like, no, I just want what I want. Or a toddler's like, I want the ice cream now. So when you have a strong ego, you can tolerate discomfort. You can delay gratification. You can adapt to situations without losing yourself. You can set boundaries without shame. You can face that reality without defending yourself. So if you actually legitimately did something wrong and someone gives you feedback on that, you can face that without just falling into shame. And that allows you to stay connected to who you really are under pressure. The ego's job is to balance your natural instincts. So from a psychoanalytic perspective, there's these three parts, right? There's the id, the ego, and the superego, right?
I've heard that.
Yeah. So the id, anyone who's had like Psych 101 will kind of remember this, right? So like the id, those are your natural instincts, which are your impulses, your desires, your urges. And then your superego is like your conscience. It's the internalized morals and ideals. And the ego needs to balance those two things in a way that's realistic. So it needs to figure out, how do I balance that within the limits of reality? It might be the ego says, I want it now. Like I don't know. I keep thinking of like babies crying. Like I want the boob, but that's a weird thing to say.
I think the toddler example definitely makes it a little bit more sense.
Let's go toddler.
I want the candy at the grocery store.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say the id wants immediate gratification of these urges, of these desires. So I want the candy. And then another part, the superego, imposes the moral rules, right? You shouldn't want that. That's bad for you. And then the ego tries to find a realistic compromise to satisfy some of the urge without breaking rules. And eventually, once the ego is more developed, then it can even not satisfy the urge. It learns like, okay, well, I gotta wait or just not have it, you know? So what does the ego need in order to get stronger and fully develop? It's an environment in which the authentic self and feelings are safe and supported. So that means other people are safe and supportive and welcoming of who you really are. So this develops in childhood and throughout life. A lot of people say, even some therapists will say, oh, well, you can't treat someone with narcissistic personality disorder, or you can't treat someone with borderline personality disorder. Like they don't get better. And that's not true. At any time, we can strengthen areas of weak ego, and that's part of what the centered framework will help us do. And once we get a strong ego, that's actually how we can become self-centered.
So to make sure I'm following this correctly so far, it is over here on one, like this is how I'm going to visualize it. It is over here on one side of a string. Super ego is over here on the other side of the string, and my ego is sitting in the center trying to keep them balanced or understanding each other. And sometimes you might pull a little bit more towards super ego because like, hey, you actually don't need that primitive thing that you're desiring, that want, that need, that like, hey, I want it now, or I have to be. Yeah. So you might be pulled more towards one side.
Yes.
And hopefully the one side is super ego because that's your moral values. I should say values.
Well, yeah, I'm just curious, why do you say hopefully it's super ego?
I guess when I'm thinking of the id, I'm thinking of impulses, and impulses, I guess, I tend to have a negative connotation usually.
Oh, okay. Because impulses could be, I need to eat.
Oh,
too.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So the id and the super ego aren't necessarily good or bad. It's just like the ego decides whether or not it makes more sense.
Fulfill.
Yeah. Or if there's a way to somehow fulfill both of them.
Got it. And then for the ego, the thing sitting in the middle of the two strings, for that to grow strong and actually make the decisions as opposed to being guided by id or super ego exclusively, a safe environment that's nurturing. That's what they need.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And don't worry, I'm going to give you so much more information about what it needs. No, but good. Thank you for clarifying or confirming. You said something. What was it? Oh, if the ego is still weak and doesn't develop and isn't strong, then it's run by the id or the super ego exclusively. So that part isn't
not accurate.
Exactly it. So what it is that the ego will still continue to try to figure out how to balance the id and the super ego. It's just going to get really anxious and overwhelmed because it's going to have a really critical, rigid super ego. So instead of being like, hey, it's important to be kind to everyone, it's like, you are a loser and you need to be the best. Or else, so you can see how this could move into narcissism. And then like the id doesn't learn to effing chill, and it continues to be really impulsive. So the ego gets really stressed out because it's like, I have a tyrant of a toddler in the id, and I have a dictator for a super ego.
Okay.
So you can see how we're going to get
just at war with yourself at that point.
That's exactly what it is. It's actually super sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is why I do have some, compassion for people with narcissism. Of course, hold boundaries though, right?
Yeah.
Compassion doesn't mean don't protect yourself. We're going to talk about how the ego develops in childhood today, and we're going to talk about it next week because there's so much information that doing it all in one episode is too much. But here is the beginning. When the child experiences being welcomed and its authentic self and feelings are safe and supported, it experiences warmth and attunement from the caregivers. And that's the clear mirror that we talk about. And anyone listening, if you don't remember, we all need clear mirrors. We need to be able to see ourselves in other people. We need those people to be able to reflect back who we are and do so in a warm, supportive way. And when we don't get that mirroring, it's a broken mirror, it's a distorted mirror, it's like a funhouse mirror. We don't actually learn about ourselves. So you can already see how when a child is accurately mirrored, they have a good mirror, they actually start to learn about who they really are. And they already have a leg up on being self-centered because they're learning who they are. And it helps them develop basic trust in other people and also in their own experience because they're getting their experience mirrored back to them. It's the opposite of gaslighting, right? It's like, these are my feelings. This is who I am. And they're responding positively and warmly, and it all syncs up. They feel safe in the world. They feel confident. And this creates an ego that believes I'm okay being me. It's okay to be me. On the other hand, though, if the true self and feelings aren't welcome and it's not safe to express them, what does that look like? It looks like their feelings might be ignored, they might be shamed, or the child might only be conditionally approved of. They do experience some positive response, but it's only for certain conditions of worth.
Oh, perfectionism?
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
I know. I was thinking about you for that one.
Here we go again.
So I think as you're listening, you're probably already getting a sense of why it's not just narcissism that can show up with a weak ego. It can also be perfectionism. Mm-hmm. It can also be codependence. Yep, we're going to learn a lot today.
Yeah,
and we can all relate.
So good.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. So when that child experiences, okay, being me is not okay, the ego creates a false self. So it creates a mask. Now, the mask can be a mask of superiority, or it can be a mask of I'm good, right? Like I'm a perfect, moral, good girl. I follow all the rules, right? It creates this false self to conform to who the parent or their religion or their culture or all of the above wants them to be. So it conforms based on what are the conditions of worth that it's learning.
And that's because those are the only things that have been validated.
Yes. And it hides the real self because that hasn't been validated. It's been ignored or shamed or, yeah. And so I know
I'm having like so much compassion for my childhood self right now. I'm like,
I'm
oh my
so
God.
glad. And I hope all the listeners feel that way too.
Oh, okay.
No, tell me more about it.
No, I just, God damn it.
No, it's okay. This is real.
I remember one of the interactions when I was like a preteen or something. Emotions were not well received in my household. There just wasn't space for them. And I remember there was something that I was super upset about as, again, a preteen. And I had gone to my room and I was crying. And I remember someone in my family had come in and had said, you just need to stop crying. You need to just buck up and get over this. This is not something worthy of crying over. And then left. And that was it. And again, like we've talked about, okay, I had a lot of experiences where I needed more nurturing, needed more warmth and support. And I'm thinking about that. And I'm thinking about like all the times too, where I've belittled my own needs and belittled my own hurts and like, oh, I shouldn't feel that way. I shouldn't, let myself be sad about this, or I shouldn't like hold space for that. And I'm just thinking about little Katie and I'm like, oh my God, well, no shit. Like, no shit. You have to be perfect and perfectly composed and handle all the situations without creating any issue or drama or looking like you don't have your shit together, because that's never been nurtured.
Yeah. And that's why parts work is so helpful, because you today can see that little part of you, and you can send her love. And in your everyday life now, when you hear her, you will be able to recognize her, and you'll be able to stop and say, hey, that's actually not true. We don't need to think that anymore.
Yeah.
And here's what's really true.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, other people's expectations become more important than staying connected to the authentic self. So for a long time, and maybe forever, if we don't do the work to become aware of what's unconscious, we lose that self, right? And so you've been doing a lot of work recently where you're like, oh, little me felt this way, little me felt that way. And you're basically unearthing Katie who got buried.
Yeah. Oh, fuck.
Oh, sorry. I know. So, like I said, we're not conscious of this process.
Yeah.
But one of the things that happens that we usually are conscious of is we feel empty inside, right? Where the true self would be, where we'd be connected to it if that true self were nurtured. There's an emptiness, and we don't know why there's an emptiness. And then what does that do? It reinforces feelings of shame and the belief that something is wrong with me. Why do I feel empty? And you're in these everyday situations with other people hanging out, and they seem so confident and they seem so themselves. So, oh, something's definitely wrong with me. And so this stuff just keeps reinforcing itself. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But we're doing a series, guys. You're going to get everything you need. It's going to get better. But if this resonates with you, then send yourself love for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that this is being spread out over a month too, because it'll give time for people to integrate and like.
Oh my gosh. I know.
Actually digest it, because this is heavy stuff.
I know. It's so true. Yeah. Yeah. So in a supportive environment, one of the things that caregivers do is they acknowledge the child's wants and needs from the id, right? While also holding limits and boundaries, which the limits and boundaries, that's super ego, but it's also reality. Like there's limits of reality. Like, no, sorry, I can't let you jump off the building because you in fact will not fly, you know?
Yeah.
So caregivers will help the kid understand that like, hey, I get that you want this. I get that you need that. I'm going to emotionally validate you. And here's what's either expected socially, morally, or like a limit of reality. Another example is that a parent might acknowledge a child who's really angry, like a toddler throwing a tantrum. And instead of shaming them, saying, I understand that you feel angry. It makes sense that you're angry. We feel angry when things don't go the way we want them to go or when we don't get what we want. So the child isn't feeling shame from that. And then the parent or caregiver can gently guide them on, here's how to express that anger safely. And the caregiver also doesn't get defensive or angry when the child then communicates anger to them. Mm-hmm. So it's teaching them that the things that you want, so the ego learns, okay, the id's wishes, the things that it wants, can be met in a socially appropriate way. And not every impulse must be acted on immediately or maybe even ever. That gives the ego confidence that it can successfully find a way to get a version of what it wants that aligns with both its values and the limits of reality. And then, because the child wasn't shamed and they were emotionally validated, the super ego that forms is still firm because there are still limits and boundaries, but it's caring and it's forgiving and it's understanding. And I'm jealous of all y'all who got this. And probably no one listening.
That's fair.
We here, we learning, we getting better. We feeling better, we healing. So this allows the ego in the adult to delay gratification or accept limits and boundaries, make wise decisions based on the reality of the situation and social values, and manage conflict without getting hijacked by shame, fear, confusion, helplessness, because that ego feels confident and the super ego isn't a dictator, right? Mm-hmm. This leads to emotion regulation. So you can see how this all builds and how it's not your fault if you weren't able to develop these things. And the good news is, again, we can develop them now. So the ego can also view reality objectively because it doesn't feel threatened by it, right? It's okay that there's limits and boundaries. I can handle that. And that allows them to handle life's demands without losing the sense of self. There is the role of attunement and mirroring. Attunement and mirroring are so similar, right? It's like caregivers are aware of and responsive to the child's inner experiences and behaviors. So natural behaviors like smiling, crying, exploring are mirrored and affirmed. And that's how the child learns, I'm valued. And that becomes the foundation of authenticity in adulthood. Because as adults, you know how you feel. You can express yourself. You feel alive. You feel real in your own skin. There isn't that emptiness because you know who you are. They're more emotionally genuine, meaning your behaviors. So what people see on the outside matches how you feel on the inside because they don't believe that they have to wear a mask to get approval, right? Being yourself is enough, comfortable with intimacy and relationships, and intimacy not even meaning sexual, but just like being seen and known. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And when you have a strong ego, you don't sacrifice your identity to gain love. If the child's authenticity wasn't safe, then they will feel shame and guilt for having impulses and they don't know how to regulate them, which creates anxiety, like I said. So since the ego didn't get the opportunity to learn how to manage all of this, like this dictator super ego and this id who's out of control, and the ego is just like, I can't handle this, it resorts to primitive defense mechanisms. And what do primitive defense mechanisms do? Distorts the perception of reality to protect the ego from overwhelming anxiety and shame so it can feel safe. So primitive defense mechanisms is basically like putting your head in the sand. It's like, nah, I can't hear you. You're not real. This isn't really happening.
When the toddler puts the fingers in the ears.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly. So a prime example of a primitive defense mechanism, and we will be going deeper into defense mechanisms in episode 2, but denial. The ego will use denial to believe that it doesn't really want what it wants, right? That it doesn't really want that. We're fine. Everything's fine. No worries. Everything's okay.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Sometimes, let's say someone who grew up in a home where they had abusive parents. They had to walk on eggshells in order to try to keep everything okay. They are focused on what's going on outside of them. Obviously, that isn't a very caring environment. And so the ego cannot allow the id to get its wants met because that is unsafe. So basically, that's a child who tries to not have needs.
Okay.
And to become smaller. And eventually, and people who have been in relationships where the focus was on the other person and you weren't allowed to have needs, eventually you might even forget what your preferences are.
Got it.
So the id is still there, but it's totally unconscious, right? It's under the sand. It's under conscious awareness. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So basically the protection is that they're denying that, oh, I have this need. Maybe that might start as hyper independence and then progress into
For sure.
not even knowing what it is that they're trying to be independent with, or losing,
for sure.
losing themselves in quotes,
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Okay. That hyper independence, no one else is going to take care of me. So I need to take care of me. So that would be a good example of I'm still aware of what the id wants or the impulses that I have. And the ego is still trying to get that met. But sometimes in certain environments, in certain relationships, you can't even do that. Right. And so, you will just not even know anymore what you want and deny what you want. And again, I say you deny what you want, but you're not choosing that. It's all
not conscious.
It's unconscious. Yeah.
Which that like reminds me of, I keep going back to this because it's still so fucking crazy to me, but the AEDP thing where like trauma is born out of going through shitty situations alone.
Yes.
And then you, like for me at least, then I was like, oh yeah, I don't need support anytime shitty situations come up. Oh, I have to do this all on my own. Oh, I can't reach out to friends. Oh, I don't have a support network. Oh,
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, and yeah. I mean, there's a billion reasons that
This is so foundational.
It's so foundational, which is why it's crazy to me that this is not something that all therapists have to go.
I was like just thinking that.
Because
this should be crash course 101.
No, it's crazy because when I'm understanding, well, literally anyone, but also my clients, this stuff's kind of important.
Yeah.
And I don't ever say like, oh, this is your id. Like, I don't think that way, like, oh, so id and super ego. But I am thinking in terms of what are they not conscious of? What did this teach them? Yeah.
Well, and I think, sorry, this is a tangent too, but
it's fine.
as someone who's very intellectual and can like think about everything happening intellectually, I would be so likely to deny that any of this stuff was bad because in my view, like I'm like, oh no, this has made me strong and I have these skills in air quotes of being able to rely on only myself. Or
Well,
like,
it is a skill.
and it is, yeah, but it's also caused me harm in other ways too, right?
Yeah.
And finding that balance, but without knowing that, oh, okay, this actually can be swung too far on the pendulum.
Yeah.
And it can cause you harm that way, or you could be doing yourself a disservice.
Right.
I would never open my eyes to be more curious about like, oh, because I didn't see myself that way, right? Until you have an awareness that, oh, wait, there could be a reason for this and it's not your fault.
Right.
It's
And it
not
doesn't mean
something-
anything negative about you. It actually means that you were resourceful and figured it out. It's just like when we talk about how the behaviors that we're engaging in now might be harming us, but at one point they helped us.
Protect us. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is the exact same thing. But
This
since
is so
it's
valuable.
since it's not a external concrete behavior that we can see and point to, it's harder to be aware of it.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm
I know.
so glad we're doing this. I'm going to say that like 10 more times today.
I'm so glad too. And I was preparing for it. I was like, we're going, and we're not even, I mean, I guess we're going deep. I don't know. We actually aren't in terms of the information given, but the topic is deep. So, yeah. So, okay. So what happens? And again, we're going to talk more about defense mechanisms in the next episode, but all you need to know is that they exist. When they're primitive, it's just denying reality, basically, or distorting reality. Because projection is another example of a primitive defense mechanism, which is basically when you take what you don't like in yourself or feel shame about, and you just think that the other person is that way. So this has happened to all of you listening. I just know for sure if you're listening to this podcast, right? When people say you're so selfish, or you are not good at communicating, or you never communicated, that was often projection. If it doesn't fit who you are, you might think, does that describe them? Oh, okay. Oops. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So over time, the false self that the ego creates in order to try to protect itself, conform, be okay, get along, belong, and the primitive defense mechanisms it uses that distorts reality, that just becomes the default automatic way of perceiving the world. People are not in reality when they have a weak ego. Not like schizophrenic, not like psychotic, but it's distorted.
Like
and the
filter.
more shame, like the more shame that a person is feeling in any given moment, the more distortions the ego is going to use. So you might experience moments with people who have weak egos where they are making sense and they are connected. In the beginning of a relationship, in the honeymoon period, where you are idealizing that person and they're feeling really good about themselves, so their shame is a little more soothed, you are going to see a better version of them and they are legitimately going to be more grounded in reality.
Well, fuck.
As the relationship continues, that shame isn't as soothed because guess what? I'm used to that drug now. We're in a relationship, right? Like,
Yeah. Well, and also challenges come up and it's not just all the fun things anymore.
Exactly. And in the beginning of a relationship, there aren't patterns yet. So you're not going to be as confident or as, no, we really need to look at this. And imagine an ego that copes with shame, with anxiety by avoiding reality. Imagine that ego has a partner that says, I'm not letting you avoid reality. We are talking about this exact thing. You are going to see the most defense mechanisms. And then you are going to get very confused. Yup. We've all experienced it. Katie's just like, some things don't make sense right now.
It's kind of good that we don't do videos for these yet.
Yeah. Eventually we'll get there.
My face can't lie.
Oh my gosh.
Oh. Okay.
Yep. Okay, so this is so sad. Okay. So, there's this emptiness inside. You sometimes don't feel real. You might lose touch with your own desires over time. And you spend so much time and focus being who other people want that your true self gets buried and you don't know who you are or what you want. That leads to people pleasing and difficulty setting boundaries, right? So people like this might be seen as too nice or hard to really get to know because they don't let their pleasant, happy guard down out of fear of being rejected. None of that sounds like narcissism, right? That's more codependent, people-pleasy, perfectionism. That's Katie and man, that's probably you all.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Yep. But then here's the narcissism kind of way that this can manifest. So some people, when they develop the false self, it's not to please others, but to avoid pain, to avoid shame. And let's say that the conditions of worth that they were taught in their culture or in their family, I don't know, I just think about men and the expectations of men, especially when it's not a healthy masculinity that you're seeing. It's more of a toxic, you have to be strong, you have to be tough, you can't have feelings. I think that is more likely to lead to narcissism because the conditions of worth aren't making people happy and making people think you're good. It's you seeming strong and like you don't give a fuck. There's this, what is the quote? There's this song that's like, it's a new art form showing people how little we care. That's Lord. But it makes me think of this because I think there is especially with a toxic masculine condition of worth of you just have to act like nothing bothers you. It's cool for you to not care. Do you have questions? You look confused.
Well, I'm wondering, because we're in this kind of era right now where we're I don't want to say transitioning because that's not entirely true, but we've got two very different sides where we have the very toxic masculinity and very healthy masculinity.
Yeah.
And I feel like there are people that are kind of being pulled back and forth between two sides. Maybe they grew up with toxic masculinity and they're trying to have a healthier form of masculinity because they recognize that, hey, toxic masculinity is not it. And it's not also going to get you accepted by the people that you want to be accepted by.
Yeah.
More than likely. If I'm thinking about generic men,
now, I mean, this is why there's a male loneliness epidemic. I think there's a male loneliness epidemic because men aren't connected to themselves. So they're lonely internally. And then, that matches, they don't have the skills to be in relationships. So it is this weak ego. But anyway, continue. Sorry.
But so I'm just wondering, the challenge of, okay, so you're over here in this toxic masculinity. That's your upbringing. That's like what helped shape your superego. Is that what I'm understanding? So, well, helped shape ego in general. So
It definitely shaped your superego.
Okay.
In terms of your values, but it also impacted your ego in terms of who are you supposed to be to get wants and needs met of the ego in this, environment.
So that created this like foundation. And then now you're over here trying to become more healthy masculinity.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a projection of an image that you think that you're supposed to.
Yes.
Behave
It's
under?
performative.
Yeah.
And the intentions are so good. So no judgment when I say that, because what else do we have if we don't know how to have true internal transformation? The only thing we have is performance, try to fake it till you make it. But that's just another mask.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
So sad. My gosh, maybe we'll do like self-centered for men. Like, I mean, not that this isn't for men, but I think like there could be different retreats in the future that we do based on here's the type of conditions of worth that you might have learned that we're going to work on. You know what I mean?
Yes. And I feel like we also need a very self-centered man to help us with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me know when you find him. I'm just kidding. I'm sure we can find one
In process.
Token self-centered man.
If you're that man.
Yeah, if you're that man, reach out. Not even kidding, actually. I think it would actually be really cool to have a self-centered man on the podcast. Or at least, like, not that you need to be, like, the perfect representation of that, right? Like, you're human. But just to be like, these are things that I've thought about, and here's my journey. Oh, we would love that. Reach out. Yeah, so when we talk about in pop culture, we say, like, a big ego. That person has a big ego. That big ego is a weak ego who's using this false self of superiority. And that is a defense, meaning that big ego, that false self of superiority is a protection or a mask that protects against that person's deep feelings of inadequacy. Yeah. So it's actually so sad.
Yeah.
It's harmful, obviously, because dealing with someone like that, you can't get them to take any responsibility or accountability or look at themselves, because then they would immediately feel so much inadequacy and shame. But it's so sad. And I just want them, I want to help you too. So if you can relate to this, I can't even imagine what it must be like right now to have narcissistic traits or a weak ego that manifested this way and be living now. Because here's the thing that people don't realize is, like, you can't just go to a narcissist and be like, you're a narcissist. Like, because the defense mechanisms, literally, they're not in reality. They're distorting what you're saying. You are not. It's like there's something between the two of you that's distorting what you're saying. Like, they literally cannot hear you. And people with narcissistic traits or narcissistic personality disorder can be helped. I have worked with people, with clients who get better, but I have to undo shame first for them.
Yeah.
It needs to be safe. They need a safe, supportive, attuned environment of mirroring. That's what therapy can be.
So the biggest, we need to put this out into the universe right now for our selfies who are listening to this. And you're like, oh my God, I'm dating the narcissist.
But also don't be the attuned environment. But anyway,
that one.
Is that
yes,
what you were about to say?
That's what I was about to say.
Okay.
Is, hey, it is not, you cannot fix them.
No, you cannot fix them.
That is not you. That is not, for
I
one,
had to
that's you
learn
getting
that
out
too.
of your seat.
Katie and I had to learn
100%. Yes, we cannot fix them.
Multiple
I hate to say this. This is not the verbiage I want to use. I'm sure there's a better way. Allie's going to tell me, but like, you kind of have to abandon that cause. Just
Yes,
fucking
you
walk
do.
away.
You
That's
do.
not for you. They need therapy.
Yeah.
They need a qualified professional. They need to pay for that shit.
I definitely need to pay for that shit. Yeah.
But also, from what I'm hearing from you, if there is someone with a weaker, wounded ego that has all of these defense and protections up, they are not able to hear you.
Yes.
even if you're the one that is aware and can see and be like, oh yeah, no, you can't fix them. They actually have to hear themselves that, oh, I need this thing within myself. I'm deciding, me choosing. I am opening a door into my ego and saying, okay, I'm going to reach out through that door and try to find a clinical professional.
Yes. No, it has to be.
You can fix them. You can't.
Also, a little bit of an aside, but I had a weak ego. It didn't manifest this way, obviously. It manifested more as the people pleaser, abandon yourself, hence why we're self-centered podcast, trying to get you all to come back from abandoning yourselves, right? And so with AEDP, that like, and I had been in therapy before that, but AEDP, which D stands for dynamic, short for psychodynamic. So it's, you know, getting to these unconscious things and repairing this and healing and strengthening the ego, I realized, oh my gosh, the work that goes in to getting to a stronger ego, you have to want. It honestly is what freed me to be able to accept the reality. Again, that was probably because my ego was able to finally learn how to accept reality, right? Instead of denying it, that, yeah, this is really sad, but it's not going to work. It's not going to change. And as sad as that is, and that you need to grieve that truth, the truth will set you free.
You, not them. Leave them out of it, but you.
They can't receive the truth.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So it's much easier for a people pleaser or perfectionist to go to therapy. Right? Yeah. Because going to therapy, that just fits right in with their usual coping strategy of problem solving, improving themselves, getting better, you know? So it fits right in with their mask. Imagine what it must be like for someone who's a narcissist. Like, how does that even resonate? So I wonder about this all the time. There are some narcissists that, yes, I have worked with them and they get better. Literally all the narcissists who have come to me, they get better. Not many narcissists come to me, which is what we would expect. So it's like, how do you get through them enough to get them to come? And some of it is, the reality is, you can't. But what needs to change? And God, we're going way off, sorry. Can we change upbringings? Can we change culture? Like, so it's these bigger things of like, okay, well, if we can change the understanding around conditions of worth in our culture and we can get healthier. Like, I just really think the more of us that become self-centered, the more of us that, you know, develop these strong egos and then can therefore, I just think it's like it all, I don't know, it all comes together.
It's a systematic thing.
Exactly, is what I'm trying to say.
It's going to take decades, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that's the case. Is when you were explaining that, the way I visualize that is it's like, okay, we have to create an environment where that behavior is not rewarded. So that someone can then recognize, oh, these protective defenses and these protective measures that I've been putting up, the way I've been behaving for all this time, it's not working for me. I need to figure out something else. And that is what might cause someone to say, maybe I'll go to therapy.
Yeah. I mean, I think someone with a superiority complex, right, which is like what this is, you need someone else who you think is superior to you. Like you truly believe. And that tracks with what a lot of people who are experts in gender studies have said about toxic masculinity and misogyny and sexism, is that it's not going to change unless men start talking to other men about it and saying, yo, it's not cool to talk that way. Like, this isn't cool. The conditions of worth need to change, but it has to come from someone that they respect because they've been taught to respect that, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you're a woman, you're fucked. You're not going to get through to them.
I was literally just thinking that. And also, because I know a bunch of women in heterosexual relationships specifically, that they're fixers. that they want to fix, and they want to help save, the guy that they're with. And it's like, oh, well, no, if he could just understand, like,
or if I can create that non-judgmental, supportive environment.
I've been so guilty of that before.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly how I was too in relationships when I was younger, and then also with my family. It's like, if I can be so compassionate and so empathetic and so loving.
But that would only really work if the ego wasn't already developed.
Who's the person?
The person that you're trying to create a safe, supportive environment for. That is
exactly.
harmful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. If you can relate to narcissism or narcissistic traits, I'm sure seeing all this stuff in culture just brings on more shame and is more confusing. If there's any part of you that resonates with this, reach out to me. Because
as a professional.
Yeah, as a professional.
Allie the professional.
Yeah, because we want to support you. I mean, Katie and I have that value, but it would be me doing the work. But like, it would just make me so happy to have a full caseload of people who meet criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. Because, I think in our culture, and I think it's actually really sad, they're just demonized.
Yeah.
And their behavior often is so harmful. And the behavior should be demonized. Mm-hmm. But the person, that person is struggling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to summarize, both narcissistic and more submissive or codependent people pleasers, perfectionists, they have weak egos. And that's because their authentic selves weren't accepted. And their differences, whether it becomes a narcissist or a people pleaser, in which false self was created to protect them, depends on the conditions of worth. Often you get narcissistic and codependent people in relationships together.
Guilty.
Because, and I say this a lot too, their puzzle piece shapes fit each other. The codependent person, the people pleaser, they lose themselves. They self-abandon to satisfy the narcissist, because how does the ego in the people pleaser make things work? By being like, who do they want me to be? How do I be quote unquote good? And then the narcissist exploits that codependent person's self-sacrifice for their own validation so that they can feel superior. And they're always dealing with the feelings of inadequacy and shame. Initially, a codependent person a people pleaser is going to be like, I see all this good in you, and I just want to show you all the good things, right? And probably have a huge heart, want to take care of them, want to save them, all this kind of stuff. Been there, done that, no judgment. It doesn't work though. Don't do it.
I do want to add too, you've said this before, and I think it's important to point out when we're talking about this, these are spectrums too.
Yes.
Yes. Narcissism, when we're talking about a very far-ended side of narcissism, when we're just talking about these generalized traits, but it can be less intense and still not be good for you.
Yep.
And vice versa. On the people-pleasing side, we're talking about someone who entirely abandons themselves.
Yes.
It can be less intense and still not be good for you.
Exactly. And the reason that we created this podcast is because we had false selves, and probably still pockets of false self, right?
Yeah.
And the false self itself is an act of abandonment. Then we have been excavating and finding our true selves that were buried, and we return to center, and we're coming up with all these practices for staying in your center and teaching them, because we want you to do the same. That's why this is our life's work. That's why it's important. I just want to take a moment to just identify. I think we already have, though. I put this in here so that we could, but I think we already have talked about like what are the false selves that we've developed. I mean,
I think it's helpful to list them out really quick though, so people have the summary.
So for me, false self, I was a chameleon. So I basically, when I was talking to people growing up and even into my early 20s, would basically figure out what are the beliefs of that person? Like, what do they believe about the world? What do they find valuable or do they like in other people? And I would become that person. And so if I ever had a party where everyone all hung out together, I don't know what I would do. Not that I was that vastly different, but I might not share certain things about myself with certain people that other people absolutely knew. And I wanted to be good in their eyes, whoever it was, whatever their version of good was. I wanted to be easy. So
Oh my God, same.
being easy, because I don't want to be high maintenance or difficult or selfish. I wanted to be emotionally attuned because I had been told a lot that I don't care. So I needed to make sure that people know that I care. I was high achieving because obviously, I mean, if you're high achieving and you're successful and you get good grades and then like no one can look down on you. I would try to keep the peace, even if that meant that there was no peace inside of me. And some perfectionism.
That pretty much summarizes that. I mean, I feel the same way about damn near all of those things. Very much the chameleon. I talked about before that I didn't have like a singular group of people that I fit in with. I just kind of bounced around and I fit in with all of them. It was not known by any of them because they couldn't know me if I was constantly, masking to match whatever vibe that I was with. The one that came up for me that with the high achieving though, was like bossy. I remember being, called as a child, like, oh, you're so bossy. You're so bossy. And I remember very quickly shutting that down, very quickly, just pulling back and be like, all right, well, I'll be high achieving, but I'll be high achieving in the background, which is one of the reasons I really struggle to take compliments now. I really struggle to accept any sort of recognition and whatnot. It like,
or celebrate achievements, I'm guessing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I like really have to be intentional with saying thank you. That's so kind of you to notice that. And actually validate those things because so wild. Yeah.
Whoa. I mean, all of you, I encourage you to take a moment and think about all the false selves and kind of the strategies of those false selves, like high achieving, that you engaged in or maybe still do. And just a reminder to you that that's not who you really are. Those are strategies. Who you really are is what you do when people don't care either way and love you no matter what. So if you are a high achieving person because you just enjoy achievement, that might be who you really are. So the same behavior can be a false self engaging it, or it could be a true self. So you kind of have to identify that for you. But when you can spot your ego overdoing its job, right, then you can recognize that's ego. So like Katie was saying earlier, she could recognize in others, oh, that's probably ego. And I'm assuming you were thinking more like narcissistic end of things, like superiority. Yeah. But we can see that in the people-pleasing way too, in the perfectionism way in others and in ourselves. So you can just recognize that and then be like, oh, okay, like that's not my true self. And I don't have to agree with that or believe that or do that. So you have a choice, but the choice comes from, it starts with awareness.
And that noticing is a sign of a stronger ego, yeah?
Totally. I think even listening to this episode and learning about it is going to give you a stronger ego, in my opinion, because it's increasing awareness. The other thing is, we've talked about this before about staying in your center. We also call it staying in your seat. When you get pulled from your seat or pulled from your center, you're in these outer rings where you're not as close to who you really are. And we get pulled because we're being a false self a lot of the time, right? Seeking approval or avoiding shame or anything like that. We can also get pulled out for other reasons, but in terms of ego, yeah. Okay, so we are almost done. Yeah. Just to talk about weak versus strong egos a little bit, just kind of just a review, but then we're going to talk about responses to different situations that a weak ego might have and then a strong ego might have, so you get a sense. So strong egos, just to review, they tend to be adaptable, based in reality, clear, like they can see things clearly, and they're self-compassionate and they have compassion for other people. Strong egos use defense mechanisms that are mature. That's the opposite of primitive. Those mature defense mechanisms, what makes them mature is that they acknowledge and accept reality, number one, And then they also redirect uncomfortable emotions and thoughts into constructive channels. So, example, humor. So we might even use dark humor. That happens a lot in healthcare. Anticipating and preparing for stressful situations. That's literally a mature defense mechanism, but it's, constructive. Problem solving. Sublimation, which is channeling uncomfortable emotions or destructive urges into constructive, healthy activities. So examples of sublimation might be, this is actually interesting. I had a client once who really enjoyed cutting, like literally like cutting skin, and went into surgery, became a surgeon.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, if you are a sociopath with a strong ego, then you might, I'm just kidding, because that's not actually, because if you're a sociopath, you have a weak ego. But,
Yeah.
But what I mean is, if you have urges that would be harmful and you're like, but my personal conscience doesn't want to hurt other people, then you can make that into something that's actually constructive and helps other people. Or maybe you become a scientist and you do like dissections or something, I don't know. Or channeling uncomfortable emotions and destructive urges, probably fitness. Sublimation would be huge for that, right? It's like, I have this anger that I need to get out, and the ego, the strong ego, is like, okay, so that's what the id has. Like, I have this desire to unleash on someone, but my super ego is like, yo, dude, like, that's not the best idea. We don't really support hurting people like that. And you're like, all right, I'm just going to go beast mode at the gym.
Physically destroy myself for personal gain and strength. Okay, but I do have a question. Backing up. So you mentioned humor and dark humor.
Uh-huh.
Those were mature?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there times where they become not mature?
Humor could be primitive, meaning not mature, when it's passive aggression, for example. Or, let me think about this. I understand what you're meaning, because there can be like really offensive, demeaning jokes.
I'm thinking of an example. There was a situation with some people that I know, and this person uses very dark humor frequently. And the dark humor in this particular situation had to do with suicide.
Oh.
And it was doubled down and very intense.
Yeah.
And this person has a past trauma related to the death of a loved one from a not normal way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think humor can join up with a primitive defense mechanism and therefore be primitive.
Like, I guess I could see it being mature if it's like you can find the funny in the situation while still acknowledging the situation. I feel like there are times where humor and dark humor can be used to avoid the actual situation.
Yes. No, definitely. I think so. I'm just, according to psychoanalysis, they don't have humor as a primitive defense mechanism. I agree with you. I'm just trying to figure out what they would say, like what a psychoanalytic theorist would say. And I think it would be like humor used to engage in denial, or humor used. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's
using it as a deflection.
Yeah, it's like you're using it as a vehicle for a primitive defense mechanism.
Got
if
it.
that makes sense. But I'm trying to think of like, but how would we apply that in relation to the suicide? I mean, that just might be bad judgment. Well, what do you think if you had to guess? I'm just trying to think like a person who's making a joke about that maybe has anxiety about it. Like, what is the thing that the ego is trying to, what is the ego trying to do? Is it like, if I make a joke about this, I'm going to be seen as like cool because I'm talking about things that are, or is it like, I feel uncomfortable with the idea of suicide, so I'm making a joke of it to avoid? And do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. But what I'll say is that with humor, yes. Like, I don't know what a psychoanalytic official expert person would say, but I'm going to say yes because it can definitely be used to avoid or distort reality.
Well, and I guess
Because a lot of people will
too,
joke about something and it's like they're saying, with passive aggression, that is a primitive defense mechanism. And it's kind of like passive aggression is, and humor can be used in a passive aggressive way where it's like you are sending a message to someone, but you're veiling it. It gets distorted by being passive.
Yeah, I wonder too, like just the manner of habit that develops. Like, let's say when you experienced death or in like a difficult death in your life and you used humor to avoid the sadness and the maybe regret that's centered around that death. And then that was rewarded because now there were happy experiences and happy feelings within the group of community that you were within. And then just over and over and over, you've had it repeated that, oh, okay, death has happened. I've made a humorous joke relative to death, dark or otherwise. And that's brought more feelings of happiness that have avoided the sadness and avoided processing the difficulty of the death or the anger surrounding the death or whatever. And then you just now do it subconsciously without even realizing it.
Yeah, definitely. You can just be in the habit of it. And I think now that I'm thinking about it, I think that's denial of the severity and the feelings associated with the severity of that. And also thinking about that person, they work in a place where I can imagine the people around them in the culture joking about very serious things, and that being maybe a toxic masculine kind of thing, and or so that would be the conditions of worth, and not really caring, right? Like things don't really bother me kind of false self mask. And I also think that it's probably a way to cope with in that job. There can be really serious things that come up. So that joke allows the person to deny the way that that situation impacted them and how they feel.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
And it minimizes the severity of it. I think that's what it is.
I do think the workplace bit of it has a lot to do with that as well, too.
Yeah, right. Yep. And then it becomes a habit. And so when you're in other social situations, because the other thing about, and we'll talk about this in the next episode too, but another thing is that when you have a weak ego, you are so focused on trying to be okay because, right, you're in an environment that wasn't supportive of you and you're trying to figure out how do I balance my wants and desires with reality, with expectations, with conscience. And so the person also doesn't get to fully cognitively develop, meaning like their brain can't fully develop certain executive functions the brain engages in, including something called mentalizing, which is being able to imagine what it must be like to be someone else. So how someone might take a joke like that.
Oh, wait. Okay. Can you explain that again?
Don't worry, I'm going to talk about it next episode.
Okay. However, we need to put a very big asterisk on that one and write that down in bold letters because I need to understand more about that.
Okay, so you heard it, right? But
I did.
You can wait until next episode for me to explain that. Okay.
You guys will have to wait too. Sucks for y'all. Tune in next week.
Yeah. So I can see how not being able to mentalize, not being able to perspective take what must it be like for someone else to receive this from me and to just be in the habit of, I joke about stuff like this at work. This is what I'm supposed to do. And it's, like I can see that happening. We're figuring all this out.
We are. I'm going to say this one bit because I don't want to forget this.
Yeah.
This particular person has said verbatim, "Oh, I don't think I have empathy."
Yeah. And mentalization is necessary for empathy.
That's literally that. They're like, "Oh yeah, I can't think about other people's perspectives."
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And again, like these things can be developed, but you need to like actually go get the deliberate help for it. And then add to the fact that people are going for cognitive behavior therapy. You know what I mean? Like, get yourself a psychodynamic. But the thing is, there's so many different types of therapy that include what we're talking about today. And people who don't know. There was an episode, though, where I gave a list of therapies.
It was the therapy episode.
Oh, great. Go listen to that.
So you're thinking about therapy. We have a whole fucking episode on it. What is therapy? What is not therapy? Therapy versus coaching. It was actually a 3-part series, right?
Yeah, it was. Another series.
It was. Oh my God. Look at us go.
Let's go. Oh my gosh. Hope you're all learning so much. All right. And then quick review. Weak ego tends to be more reactive, tends to be more defensive, literally uses these primitive defense mechanisms, is driven by trying to be what other people want them to be and avoiding shame, avoiding anxiety, and not really good at knowing what reality is, unfortunately, especially when they're feeling anxious or shame. And they use primitive defenses that deny or distort reality, such as denial, projection, and rationalization, which we'll talk about more in depth next episode. But rationalization is basically making excuses. I have this story that sounds rational and real about why I can't do it. It's not why I can't do it, but I'm going to use it. Here is how someone with a weak ego would respond to certain situations versus how someone with a strong ego would respond to that same situation. So, situation is someone sets a boundary. Someone with a weak ego would think they hate me, right? Or I'm not good enough. If you think about a people pleaser, a perfectionist, that kind of, or how could you do this to me? And so it could be guilt, it could be rage or anger. Because if you set a boundary with someone who believes that they are superior to you, they're like, who do you think you are?
You
right?
blindsided me.
Yeah. Katie's like actively processing. So a strong ego would respond to someone setting a boundary with thinking, I might not like this, but I can respect it. Right? So I talked about a boundary that I received on some episodes sometime. If you listen, I don't know all of them. I don't have them all memorized, but if you've listened to us every single week, you'll remember that I was temporarily living with a friend in a separate building on their property. And they said, because my dog is big and she was accidentally knocking over their toddler because she was excited. And they said, hey, she can't come in here. And I was like, well, that's a bummer for me because I got to come in for different reasons like cooking and doing my laundry and stuff. But I totally respect that, you know? Yeah. So, okay, different situation. You're misunderstood. A weak ego response is, I must not have said it right. Okay, so we've been there.
Oh my God, I've been guilty of that. Holy shit, the number of times I've been guilty of that.
Yeah.
If I just explain it better.
Right.
Which goes to the Jade thing, right?
Yes. Justify, argue, defend, explain. Look at you, acing.
It's coming together.
It's coming. I know. As we're doing more and more episodes, I feel like it's really clicking.
Yes.
Like you're getting like the whole self-centered map almost.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm excited for the episode 3 weeks from today where we go over the framework. So that'll be great. If someone with a superiority complex is misunderstood, it's like, you're a dumbass for not understanding me. You know what I mean? Like, because they feel superior to you.
Yeah.
A strong ego would respond to not being understood as, I was clear. Their reaction is theirs to manage. Having a strong ego is, oh, gosh, people who are just grew up in these attuned, safe households, we jealous of you. We know you're not listening, but we're jealous. Because can you imagine never having to be tormented over like being misunderstood and feeling like you have to over-explain, defend yourself, and just be like, oh, well, I was clear, and their reaction is theirs to manage. Or for me, now that I understand egos and I can recognize, okay, that person has a weak ego, it's like, I was clear, they can't hear me, and they're not going to hear me because they're going to distort whatever I say with defense mechanisms. So they are confused. They legitimately don't understand me, but it's not my fault.
Yeah, you can give yourself permission to let it go.
Yeah. And the way I think about that is like having a weak ego is like speaking like Italian or something. And no offense to Italians or anything. I'm just saying it's like speaking a different language and I'm picking a random language. So having a weak ego is like speaking Italian. Okay, well, I speak French. Me with my strong ego, I speak French. And so you're not going to understand me and you're going to have to strengthen your ego and learn French in order to understand me. And that's on you. Like you're the one who has to figure that out. And guess what? If I try to teach you this language, you're not going to hear me. So I also can't do it. So, okay. Let's see. You feel rejected, that situation. So weak ego, either they're terrible. So think of people that you've been on dates with and you've been like, oh, I just don't, I don't see it. And they're like, you're ugly anyway. Like that's a weak ego, right? Or I'm terrible is a weak ego, right? I'm rejected. Oh, it's because something's wrong with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then a strong ego response would be you stay connected to your internal worth of like, okay, well, I like me. I don't reject myself. I'm not for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, a situation you feel guilty about something that you did. A weak ego would defend or deny or collapse into guilt and shame. I made this mistake. I'm so dumb, right? Strong ego would reflect, hey, am I guilty? Did I do something that doesn't align with my values? And if I did, I'm going to take accountability and I'm going to adjust. If I didn't, then I'm going to let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah. It takes work to get to the strong ego, but dang, things are easier once you're there.
Yeah.
Yup. So, okay. That's all we got for today. I mean, not that was a little bit or something. Do we have, I'm not going to give you any pod practice selfies because you're going to get those for like the entire last 2 episodes of this series is pod practice.
I will say, for the sake of integration, go back and listen to this multiple times and see where you see yourself.
Yes.
Start noticing where you see yourself on the spectrum. Are there areas in your life where it's like, oh yeah, this is something that based off of, what we talked about today might be me operating within a weak ego. Mm-hmm. And these are situations or experiences or behaviors that I have that might be me operating within a strong ego, and just start noticing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, just like when we talked about narcissism, how that's on a spectrum, people pleasing, that's on a spectrum. Strong ego and weak ego is also on a spectrum. And there might be areas where you have a strong ego and areas where you have a weak ego. Yeah. So it isn't one or the other. And recognizing the weak ego in you, hopefully, because of the way that we've explained everything, you understand that doesn't mean anything negative about you. It just means you didn't get what you needed, and we're going to give you what you need. And you even listening to this is you taking responsibility for improving these things. And also give yourself so much love, because the areas where you have a weak ego are areas where you didn't get what you needed.
Yeah.
All right. We love you. We will see you next week. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. Follow us on Instagram at selfcentered.pod or connect with us at selfcenteredthepod@gmail.com.
Stay self-centered, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Peace.